Today I'm beginning chapter 8 called The Journey Back. The very first section is called The Direction of the Curriculum. Knowledge is not the motivation for learning this course. Peace is. This is the prerequisite for knowledge only because those who are in conflict are not peaceful. And peace is the condition of knowledge because it is the condition of the kingdom. Knowledge can be restored only when you meet its conditions. This is not a bargain made by God, who makes no bargains. It is merely the result of your misuse of his laws on behalf of an imaginary will that is not his. Knowledge is his will. If you are opposing his will, how can you have knowledge? I have told you what knowledge offers you, but perhaps you do not yet regard this as wholly desirable. If you did, you would not be so ready to throw it away when the ego asks for your allegiance. All right, so that first paragraph is telling us that knowledge is not what we think it is from our ego perspective. That this course is not about gaining knowledge. It's about peace. It's about returning our mind to peace. And the way that we do that is with God's will, which is true knowledge. Not the ego's interpretation of what knowledge means, but what Spirit's interpretation of knowledge means, which is the knowledge of our truth. Knowing that we are pure spirit, that we are one with God, that we are one with one another, extending love eternally. That is the truth of the kingdom. The kingdom is another word for heaven. Heaven is not a place. It is a state of oneness. It is a state of mind. And that is where we find peace. So this first paragraph is explaining to us that we don't find peace desirable yet. Why? Because we're still identified with the ego too much. That's why he's saying if you did, meaning value our truth, you would not be so ready to throw it away when the ego asks for your allegiance, because that is what we're doing most of the time. We're throwing our truth, our knowledge, our peace away all the time because the ego is asking for our allegiance, and we are giving our allegiance to the ego. And we're just throwing away our peace, throwing away our truth. The distractions of the ego may seem to interfere with your learning, but the ego has no power to distract you unless you give it the power to do so. All right, and that's what we're all doing all the time. The ego's voice is an hallucination, he tells us. We are literally hallucinating all the time when we believe in the ego, when we believe this world. You cannot expect it to say, I am not real. Right? We can't expect the ego to tell us that. It's not going to happen. Yet you are not asked to dispel your hallucinations alone, right? He knows we can't do it alone. We're too lost. You are merely asked to evaluate them in terms of their results for you. So he's asking us to pay attention to our truth, which is that we are not at peace most of the time. Those are our results most of the time, and that is what we are being asked to evaluate, because the ego doesn't want us to evaluate any of that. It doesn't want us to pay attention. It wants us to keep going in loops that keep us in misery and keep us disempowered. If you do not want them on the basis of loss of peace, they will be removed from your mind for you. So if we don't want our non-peaceful thoughts, because they cause us to lose peace, those thoughts will be removed from our mind for us if we are willing to give them to Holy Spirit. That's what he's telling us. Every response to the ego is a call to war. And war does deprive you of peace, right? Yet in this war, there is no opponent. This is the reinterpretation of reality that you must make to secure peace, and the only one you need ever make. Those whom you perceive as opponents are part of your peace, which you are giving up by attacking them. So everyone in the world who appears to be an opponent of ours is really there for our peace. Why? Why is that true? Because they are just a forgiveness lesson. They're not really there. They are a hallucination, is what he's described to us. Those opponents of ours that appear to be out there in the world are just an opportunity for us to see through it, to know that it's just a hallucination, to know that it's a trick of the ego for us to believe in separation and attack and defense. And therefore, it's a gift for us to choose our peace, because we are meant to overlook that illusion, to overlook this perception that we have an opponent out there, and instead to forgive, to say, oh, wait a minute, now I remember there's nobody out there. Whoever I think is out there that's attacking me or making me have to defend myself somehow is just a projection coming from my ego split mind. I'm going to remember truth, which is that that person or those people or that situation isn't even there, that it's coming from my own split mind. And what am I missing? Why do I feel that my mind is split? I'm missing the love of God. The love of God is there waiting for me. I just forgot to perceive it. That's all that's happening here, is we are just forgetting to perceive our truth. So he's explaining to us that we are giving up our peace when we are choosing to attack others in our mind. How can you have what you give up? You share to have, but you do not give it up yourself. All right, so this is a confusion that we have between ego and spirit. We are confused as to how giving something up means that we are gaining something, meaning that this is how we can have something. And he's explaining that that's true because we share to have. Remember, share means practicing forgiveness. So we forgive the world for not existing, for not being there, for just reflecting our own split mind back to us. That's what we forgive the world for. He's saying, but you do not give it up yourself. Why is that true? Because we have to do it with Holy Spirit. And remember, Holy Spirit is simply the right part of our mind. Holy Spirit is us. We are one with one another and with God. Holy Spirit is the memory of God, or the voice for God in our dream, to remind us what our truth is, to whisper to us, to help us wake up from the dream. So that's Holy Spirit's whole job, is to help us wake up from the dream. So that's why we have to do it with Holy Spirit, the higher part of our mind, the right part of our mind, because the wrong part of our mind is confused by ego and we're lost. So we need to depend upon the right part of our mind, Holy Spirit, to remember our truth. When you give up peace, you are excluding yourself from it. When we believe in the world, we give up our peace, because we believe that we have a split mind. We believe that others are separate. We believe that we are vulnerable and that others are vulnerable. And by doing that, we are giving up our peace. We're excluding ourselves from our peace. He says, this is a condition so alien to the kingdom that you cannot understand the state that prevails within it. We're so lost in this world of ego separation and of pain that the condition of the kingdom, which is peace, is completely alien to us. And that's why we cannot understand the state that prevails within it. The peace, the truth, the love, the oneness. Because we forgot our truth. Your past learning must have taught you the wrong things. Simply because it has not made you happy. On this basis alone, its value should be questioned. Right? We forget to do that. We assume that pain is the norm, that that's just life, right? And we don't even question it. But he's suggesting that we do question it. If learning aims at change, and that is always its purpose, are you satisfied with the changes your learning has brought you? No, we're not satisfied. Dissatisfaction with learning outcomes is a sign of learning failure, since it means that you did not get what you wanted. All right. So again, he's very kindly roasting us and pointing out, listen, people, you are miserable. Start to pay attention. Why are you miserable? What are you believing that's bringing this misery? Because he's telling us in this book that all the things that we're believing that are making us unhappy aren't even true, that they are a hallucination. And therefore, we are ill-equipped to assess anything that we think that we're seeing in our hallucination. And we need to give our mind to Holy Spirit for cleansing so that we can see clearly. Because what the ego has been teaching us has failed us because we are dissatisfied. The curriculum of the atonement is the opposite of the curriculum you have established for yourself, but so is its outcome. So he's explaining to us that the curriculum of the atonement, which is peace, love, wholeness, oneness, is the opposite of the curriculum that we've established for ourselves, which is the curriculum of the ego. It's the exact opposite. Separation, misery, despair, attack, defense, fear, sin. If the outcome of yours has made you unhappy, and if you want a different one, a change in curriculum is obviously necessary. He's always telling us how obvious all of this is. And it's true. Once you look at it from the perspective that he's describing here in this course, it is really obvious. And that's why the ego has to work so incredibly hard to keep us lost in hallucination, so that we don't notice how obvious the answer is for us to exit the lie of the ego. The first change to be introduced is a change in direction, right? We have to turn away from the ego and toward spirit. A meaningful curriculum cannot be inconsistent, all right? The ego's curriculum is constantly inconsistent. It's a world of duality. It goes like this, right? But spirit's curriculum is consistent. It is always love, always peace, always oneness. If it is planned by two teachers, each believing in diametrically opposed ideas, it cannot be integrated. So that's his way of telling us that if it's planned by two teachers, meaning both ego and spirit, each believing diametrically opposed ideas, right? Because they're exact opposites, it cannot be integrated. These two cannot work together. It's an either or situation. Both cannot coexist. If it is carried out by these two teachers simultaneously, each one merely interferes with the other. And that's what we're doing when we're choosing to go back and forth between the two teachers. Sometimes we're choosing spirit, but mostly we're choosing ego. And therefore, those two teachers are interfering with each other. What he's always telling us in this course is we must choose one. And we're choosing in each now moment. So it's okay if you forget. It's okay if you make a mistake. It's okay if you get lost in the ego. You always have a new now moment, which is the only time that really exists, to forgive. You can forgive something that's happening right now. You can forgive a fear that you have about the future. You can forgive a thought that you had in the past. You can forgive behavior that you have exhibited in the past. You can forgive anything you want at any point on any timeline, anywhere in illusory time. Okay? There's only the now moment. So don't feel disempowered if you forget and you get lost in the ego, because he's explaining that these two teachers are canceling each other out. That's okay. Don't let it overwhelm you, the responsibility of that. Just know that you always have another now moment to choose again. And the choice that we want to make is spirit, having Holy Spirit be our guide, because that helps us wake up from the hallucination so that we can return our mind to peace. All right, so he was talking about the two teachers interfering with each other. This leads to fluctuation, but not change, he says, right? We fluctuate back and forth between spirit and ego, being all confused, which is why it's leading to fluctuation back and forth, but not to change, because you can't make real change when you keep going back to the ego's hallucination. The volatile have no direction. The ego is the volatile, and the ego has no direction. They cannot choose one because they cannot relinquish the other, even if it does not exist. So he's saying, of the two teachers, we cannot choose spirit because we have not relinquished ego, even if the ego doesn't exist. Right? It's just our belief in it that gives it all the power. Their conflicted curriculum teaches them that all directions exist. So if we're believing both teachers, those two curriculums are conflicted, they don't work together. And it is teaching us that all directions exist, meaning that both ego and spirit exist. And it gives them no rationale for choice. So when we think that both are real, we forget that we have a choice and that we have to choose just spirit. The total senselessness of such a curriculum must be fully recognized before a real change in direction becomes possible. So until we understand the total senselessness of the ego and its curriculum, we cannot have real change. You cannot learn simultaneously from two teachers who are in total disagreement about everything. It's not possible. Their joint curriculum presents an impossible learning task. They are teaching you entirely different things in entirely different ways, which might be possible, except that both are teaching you about yourself. Your reality is unaffected by both. If you listen to both, your mind will be split about what your reality is. Okay, so he's reiterating that we can't choose both teachers. If we do that, we're screwed. We're completely lost and confused, and we're going in circles. There is no direction, and we can't have real change. That we have to identify this truth, that we have to know that the ego is false and that it's a hallucination, and that is how we get started on the right track, following spirit, which will lead us to awakening, which will lead us to peace. When he says your reality is unaffected by both, it means that our reality, which is spirit, is not affected by ego. The only reason it appears to be affected by ego is because we are believing in ego. But in reality, ego does not exist. That's why he's saying our reality is unaffected by both. But if you listen to both, meaning if we're listening to both ego and spirit, your mind will be split about what your reality is, meaning our mind will be split. We'll be thinking both ego and spirit are real, and then we're lost all over again. So to make it very simple, what he's saying here is there appears to be two teachers. One of them is false. That's the ego. The only one that's real is spirit. And if we want to have peace, if we want to return our mind to love and to wholeness, we need to deny the ego, knowing that it's not real, that it's a hallucination, that we need to overlook it by forgiving it, and we need to stay focused on spirit, which is our truth, and that is what returns our mind to peace.